Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 19 of Shakin Hands. I'm your host, Jack Moran. You can find me on Instagram at Blue Collar Kid. That is Blue Collar KEHD. Today on the episode, we have Redden, the founder of Hypergrowth Franchising.
That's it. Hypergrowth Franchising.
Franchising.
Yeah,
okay.
You got it.
We're close.
Yeah, close. Right there.
90%. Tell us a little bit about like what you do, like what your company is. Give us a little background.
Sure. So I grew up in Kentucky, moved kind of all over South Florida, St. Louis, Missouri, now here in Charlotte, North Carolina. But I've been in franchising for about 6 years now. So throughout my career, I've worked with people who wanted to buy franchises, people who were looking to get into business for themselves, coaching them through that process, teaching them what that looked like. After that, I started my own company about a year ago, really working on the franchisor side of things. So these are companies that are wanting to grow in the franchise space and figure out how to do that. So what I do is I sit down with them, walk through the legal documents, the sales, marketing, operations, everything they need to know that they probably don't know about their business. And I always use a key line from the E-Myth Revisited. So you want to focus on growing your business, not focus on working in the business. And that's what my goal is working on how they're going to grow their business as they expand into the franchise market and not just be their 1 to 2 locations they have locally.
So I want to start with this. How do you define a franchise? What is a franchise?
So a franchise model is really something that can be duplicated in the multiple markets. Now, if you look at yourself and say, I'm the face of this business is not going to succeed without me in it, probably not a franchisable model. But if you as the owner can take a step back and you've got a unique concept, you have something that people have asked to see in different markets, and you've got fans or people who are willing to take that brand and really expand it, and you have a good option for franchising.
So what is the process? Like, let's look at my business, for instance. Sure. We have a proof of concept. We have a defined sales process, per unit due diligence. How do I start scaling that up through the franchise model?
So I always like to sit down with people, and like I said, there's a few differentiations I want to focus on when we're getting you into that place. The first was, what's your differentiator? What makes you unique? In today's world, there's probably very few businesses where there's only one and only. So what makes you unique to the rest of the competition? Once we figure that out, I then say, okay, well, if you have that unique piece of it, do you want to scale it? Are you willing to sort of take your feet off of it and let somebody else drive the ship, but you be there to support them? Almost like backseat driving. They're driving the car, but you're in the backseat giving them the directions the whole time. Can you do that? Or do you have to drive the car the entire road trip there? If so, you're not going to be able to do it. And then after we get to those pieces, that's when we start looking, now how do we take your current operations that you have, systemize it, and then we can put in an operations manual. So when you give this book to a new franchisee, they can read through the book and without even picking up the phone and call you, they could run the business just like you're running the business. And those things are really what you look at. Okay, now we have a franchisable model. Then we can get in the minutia of doing the legal documentation to get you into that space. And as we're getting the legal documentation completed, let's start focusing on how we're going to go out and find those franchisees and train them once we get them on board. So,
what is the outline for a good operational manual? What goes into a good operational manual?
Really, I call it the Bible, like the Bible of that business. So it's everything from their mission, their vision, how to set up the business. It's how to run the business. It's how to hire and train employees, how to go make sales, how to expand, what equipment you need. Some operations manuals can be 50 pages and other operations manuals can be 500 pages. It really just depends on what you need. And the good thing about the operations manual is it's like a living, breathing document. So you're not going to have it right the first time around. You're going to have to add to it. You're going to have to scale it. You're going to take things out. You're going to put things in as the business grows. And it's a lot easier to modify that operations manual than it is to go in and modify the legal documents. So I always say, just make sure that once you're starting to think about franchising, start documenting everything you do. There's a really good guy, Alex Ramosi. I'm sure everybody knows him these days, but he always talks about writing and documenting everything you do. Show the process. And taking that process and learning how you've done in the past, you can then implement that in the future when you're growing somebody else's business. So, you come in and buy a business that's, your franchisee comes and buys, they're going to be able to take what you've done and they can move it into whatever market they want to. And all you have to do is now go in and support them on how we're going to find the location, how we're going to go out and do sales. And you support them from there on out, but you want to give them that guidance of what they need.
Yeah, and I think it's really powerful advice. Like, people ask how to remove themselves from a business. And like, as a business owner, so often people are coming to you to like make decisions based on your experience. And if you're not documenting those things, you may answer the same question 50 times. But if someone comes to you with a problem and you put that into the operational manual, you immediately remove yourself from that problem, because from that point forward, anyone runs into that problem,
Exactly.
It's in the manual and they don't need you to.
Exactly. And that's one thing even in my days of coaching franchisees, I've been on both sides of the coin at this point. I've coached franchisees and I've coached franchisors. And when I coach franchise owners, one of the things I always tell them is, did you read the operations manual? It's sort of like the teacher when you call them up, say, hey, what's the answer to this question? Well, look in your textbook. It's probably in the textbook. I always say, read the operations manual first. If you can't find any operations manual, then give me a call and I'll get back to you with the answer. And that's what we're there to do. We're there to support, but we're not there to solve every single problem when you're on the franchise space.
So as a business owner that hasn't franchised yet, like, what is the first steps you need to make to remove yourself from the business? And what are the limitations that keep people from removing themselves from the business?
It's a good question. The first thing I would say that people do when they're wanting to get to that space is, like I said, start figuring out your process. I think people usually do that last. It's probably helpful to do it in the beginning. It's track what you're doing. But then also begin with the end in mind. Know where you want to go. If you're looking to get into that franchise space, start working on that day one. You've got your models. You've got something that's unique. Start building those ideas of what you're going to do to franchise it. And it's always safe to maybe open up a second or even a third location just to really show you've got some meat on the bones. Because what you do when you open that second and that third location, you're showing yourself that I don't have to be in here managing the day-to-day operations. I've learned how to hire the right people and put them in the right seats on the bus to really do what we need to do in our business. And at that point, you're already taking a step back more into a leadership role. You're doing more strategic planning and supporting the locations that you have open, and you're realizing that you're setting yourself up to, this is a good franchise model. We've got 3 to 4 locations open at this point, and we're successful, and everything's profitable, because that's another big part of it. You want to be in the green. Somebody's not going to buy a franchise. It's all red at the bottom of the P&L, but you're like, we've got something here. We've got some legs. Let's figure out how to franchise it. And you can go through companies where they're kind of piecemeal the entire operation together, or you can find somebody like my organization that'll come in and they do the full project for you and the full scope of the work. And it's everything from the operations manual, the legal documents, sales and marketing, like I said, and a full package, to where, again, you're even taking that and putting it in somebody else's hands, so you're not figuring out how to do it yourself. Don't reinvent the wheel.
Is there like key metrics that you're looking at to see to determine whether or not a company is a good candidate to be a franchisee? Because obviously they may be profiting for themselves, but you bring in someone else and you have to incentivize them. There has to be some margin left over. I don't know if there's like a specific margin that you guys are looking for, specific metrics that.
Now, for somebody like to buy the franchise and like run a franchise location, is what you're asking?
Well, say I have a company and it profits 10%.
Okay.
On the bottom line, and if I was going to franchise that out, now I have a new partner. It may not be enough meat on the bone if I can only give them 5%. Like, is there specific metrics, or it doesn't really?
Yeah, 10's running a little low.
Yeah.
Just because one of the things you have to think of when you're franchising is you're going to have royalties in there. And royalties can run anywhere between 0 to 25% of gross sales of your business, depending on the franchise organization.
Is it usually based off the top line?
That's based off the gross sales, yeah, on the top. So average, you see somewhere between 5 to 10's of royalty these days in the market. But if you're looking at that 5 to 10 mark range, that's already 5 to 10% off the top of your business. And then you usually have some sort of advertising budget in there. And then you have a national ad fund. So you could get anywhere between 10 to 15% sometimes of your business being taken by corporate it helps the franchisees in the long run, but that's being taken off. So if you're only making 10% and then they're taking an additional 10% off, you're not really making any.
Right.
And I always like to try to shoot for that 30%. Very good. As I know, a lot of businesses will stick to that 20% at the bottom line as the net, but you just want to make sure that there's healthy money on there, because that's what the franchisees look for. First thing they usually do when they're looking to buy the business, they flip it up, or the franchise disclosure document open. They look at the item 19, which is the financials document, and they see what the averages are looking like. And if you're a new franchisee or franchisor, really all you have to go off of is the numbers you have in that document. And that's what people are going to go off of, is the popularity, and they're taking a bet on you. If you're a more existing franchise owner and you have 300 locations and 10 different states, then people are going to look at it and like, okay, these guys, they got healthy numbers. It shows in the documents. So you just have to be willing to share that with them, and you want to support them, because also, if the franchisee fails, and ultimately you're failing.
Right.
Because once you get in that franchise space, you make your money on how well the franchisees are doing.
Right.
So if the franchisees aren't making money, you're not making money. And you've got a failing system, and your franchisees are your best salespeople. So the less, the worse that they do, the worse it's going to be for your business. They're not going to help you sell your locations. They're not going to be advocates of the brand. And you want people in your franchise system who love the brand just as much as you do as the owner. And when they're talking about how excited they are, they're just gung-ho. And, I said that's probably some of my favorite franchise salespeople is the one to say, this brand is the best investment I've ever made. And they're like, I would do it again in a heartbeat, because it's been nothing but support and great relationships with them since day one.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me that, as you mentioned before, that the franchisee takes their cut off the top line. That's kind of a big risk for the holding company, is it not? Or the corporate company?
Yeah, so not really, because if you take it at the bottom, then it's what's left over. There's that old adage as well. I love reading. I love reading business books, and there's a book. It's called Profit First, and it's all about paying yourself first.
Yep.
And if you even take it to the spiritual realm, and you look at like what the Bible says, it's 10% tithings. You pay that 10% to God before you pay out the rest of your bills. It's sort of the same thing. Whatever that royalty is, that gets paid out to the company, because if you're looking at the franchisor side, yeah, they might be making some profit off of that, but really what they should be doing with that money coming in from royalties is investing that back into the company.
Right.
And the good franchisors out there, what they're doing is they're investing that back into supporting franchisees. So how can we build our sales team to bring on national accounts? How can we increase new initiatives, research and development? What can we do to build our lead generation budget and find new franchisees to bring into the system? What tools, what resources can we give them to continue improving their business? Because if we're still taking this flat line percentage every single month, their sales should increase over time. So if we start by just collecting 5% off of 500,000, that's great. But if that business in 2 years is doing 1.5 million, and you're still collecting 5% every month, it's a long-term success.
Right.
That's why I say, you're buying a business, don't look at it. You're giving them a franchise fee, and the franchisor is just making a bunch of money on a franchise fee. That franchise fee goes back into the business. The franchisor makes their money on their royalties. That's where your long-term success comes in, because then you've got multiple locations all paying the same amount percentage, or maybe modified depending on what your model looks like. And that's all going back into the franchise system to grow and scale the franchise system. More training, more support, more growth, more brand recognition, better purchasing power, all of those things.
How'd you get into this business?
So kind of a unique story. I went to college for campus recreation, so recreation administration, and just realized I wasn't a big fan of the higher education sector, didn't want to do that anymore. So got a job at a country club as a director of marketing down in South Florida. While I was working at the country club, a friend of mine who worked there as well, him and I talked business all the time. We were usually talking podcasts, books, neat investment ideas, whatever was just interesting that day. And his brother actually worked for one of the largest privately owned franchise organizations in the world. And he said, have you ever thought about going into franchising, working with small business owners, coaching them? And my experience in franchising at the time was McDonald's, like most people. Also, I know McDonald's and I know KFC and Taco Bell, but no. And he said, you should just check them out and see what you think. So I went in, I talked to the team, fell in love with not only the company I was working for, but the concept of franchising. It gave basically people who want to own a business, but they want that support as well. And it gave them that footing to do so. And usually people buy a business for 3 different reasons. It's going to be the legacy play. It's that person that they build a business up, they give it to their kids, and then their kids can run that business and sell it off if they want to. It's the guy who's retiring, he's 65 years old, but he's not ready to be done yet and play golf every day of the week.
Right. And
then there's the last one who's the empire builders, and they're looking to scale something huge. And you hear about these groups like the Flynn Restaurant Group where they have thousands of restaurants. They want to be somebody like that, or try to be somebody like that. So you start looking at these people who's in this industry, and you're like, this is how you help them figure that out. And you do that by being the introduction. So my role in my time with the company was I was working with franchise owners that wanted to buy businesses, coaching them through that process and helping them get on board, because you're the first person they meet, they build a relationship with you, and then you're there to support them as they grow with your team. So
what have you learned about relationships through this process? How important they are, and what is the key to having good, long-lasting relationships?
The good, I'm liking these questions, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I say the biggest thing when it comes to it is, it's going to sound tacky, but communication. I said communication in relationships is really how you drive relationships forward, and that's personal, it's business, it's whatever industry you're in, whatever thing you're looking at. If you don't have a two-way conversation going on, then you're never going to be successful. It's all about having opening dialogue, it's hearing each other, and it's really figuring out how to support the other person. What we can control at the end of the day is what we do for others. We can't control what others do for us. So what can I do to others to make them successful? And if I can be all in on that and pour that into them, that's what I want to do. And then, I feel just the way life works is ultimately that comes back to support you in the right way as well.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
What would you now tell yourself just starting out to do differently?
Read more. Yeah. I would definitely say read more, but read more on books that make sense to what you want to know. Growing up, my experience with reading was you read in school, you read because you had to, not because you wanted to. Now looking back at it, if I could have put another 5 to 10 years of reading into the system, who knows where I'd be at now. Because once I really got into reading, I started doing about 20, 25 books a year is what I try to lock in. And I would probably have another 30, 40 years of experience in my belt if I started reading more, because those books that I'm reading now, I would read back then and been adding new books on.
What are the most profound books that you've read thus far that you would recommend to anyone?
Probably the top of my list is, if you're familiar with Ed Mylett, he's a business coach, very healthy guy, but he's a business coach. He's owned a lot of businesses, but
the name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's all over the internet, all over social media. A great guy, just from listening to his podcasts, his books, everything. But he has a book called The Power of One More that he put out a few years ago. And the main principle of it is just do one more. And it's one more of everything. If you're at the gym, one more rep. If you're in sales, you're making calls, one more call. You're clocking out at 5 o'clock. I can guarantee you the good sales rep and the great sales rep, they're going to be leaving at a different time. The guy who's a good sales rep, 5 o'clock or 4:58, he's hanging up his headset, he's done for the day. The guy who's good at 5 o'clock, he's hitting the call one more time to see if one more person picks up, because that person probably just got off work and they're going to make it. And then, it's one more hangout. You've got friends, family members, you don't know the last time you'll see them. So if you get that chance, go grab dinner with them one more time. If, you get a chance to go home and visit family because you're not from that area, go see family one more time. So it's that power of one more. It's really hit me, because I try to do that wherever I can. I usually say yes to things because it might not be happening again. not to get super deep, but that's the power of one more is a big one. And then another one that I really liked was The Go-Giver, which I don't know if you read The Go-Giver or not, but it's all, and in life, everybody's about what we can get. And The Go-Giver, it's a fable. It's like a story, but there's good business lessons in there. And it's, what can you give? What kind of giving can you give back to other people? And, like we talked about earlier, it's going to give back to you in the long run. So give as much as you can, and just always do the one more, because you don't know what it's going to lead to. You're just one more decision and one more action away from doing something that's going to, or one more interaction that's going to change your life. So
it's fantastic advice.
Yeah.
Do you read anything outside of business?
I get bored. I've tried science fiction. I've tried history. I've tried the different books. I usually can't do it. I can't focus. It's usually business. It's management, sales, those sort of things. It's just, that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. Like, I've always read nonfiction, and I didn't understand a practical application to reading like nonfiction. But I've realized now, just like the power of words and language, and like reading some of these like literary masterpieces, like expand your vocabulary and your language. And that's very powerful in business. So that's like kind of been my excuse now to reading more like poetry and like hearing more metaphors and the power of metaphor in language and how it can drive imagination, which can be very seductive and influential. So that's kind of been my like recent discovery, is reading more, balancing it out with some nonfiction too.
And there's definitely things in there about that too. I think you just have to, it's like any kind of writing style. If you find somebody that you're a big fan of, if you even look at TV shows, usually you'll watch a TV show or a movie because it's been made by a certain director or creator, and you want to follow them. Books are the same too. I read The Alchemist a few years ago, and The Alchemist is one of those books that, it's not a business book, but you always hear about in the leadership development space. It's just a story. It's an adventure story, but there's a lot of things you can take away from it. And there's, like I said, there's a lot of that poetic language in there. And one of the things I'm wanting to do is, I've got it on my list. I want to read more of his books, because I can't remember his last name now, Pablo something. But books like that, you're right. So you need to branch out more and do that. That's something I should probably work on. So
no, it's like, it's been difficult for me as well, but I'm like, I need that pragmatic excuse or like justification to read it. What would you say, and I always ask people this, what are you chasing after? Like, what is your definition of success? Why are you barreling down this journey?
Really, it's to leave a legacy. And one of the things I read years ago was, as you grow and you're part of companies and you're part of organizations, every company and every business you're a part of, they have a mission statement. And mission statements can be paragraphs, or mission statements can be, sorry,
you're good.
Oh man, throwing mics around now. I'm getting angry with you. So it's
pretty typical, honestly.
Start punching mics and I'm getting fired up.
I think Joel knocked it like probably 10 times.
I make you feel better. So one thing I'll say is, I've always read mission statements are key to an organization. So I've created a personal mission statement for myself. And, my personal mission statement is to leave a legacy and to make an impact. And that's really what I want to do, is when I look at my life in general, I'm trying to leave a legacy for the future family that I'll have one day. I want to leave a legacy for them, and I want to make an impact. And that making an impact, it could be a quick conversation like this. It could be connections with family and friends, people in my church group. It doesn't matter where I'm at. I just want to impact somebody's life for the better and help them get along. And if I can do that, then I feel like I'm hitting my personal mission statement.
Have you found any overlaps in your life between spirituality and business?
Yeah, absolutely. So really everything I do goes down to my background and my Christian faith and me being a believer in Jesus. I want to do as to others as they do unto me. I want to treat people right. I don't want to get a sale or do business just to make a sale and do business. I want to do it the right way. So if somebody's looking at buying a franchise and they might be light on cash, or it might not be a good situation for them and their family, I want to tell them that. I'd much rather them be mad at me for a little bit And then in the long run, he'll call me and thank me for not letting them invest a few $100,000, then them investing a few $100,000, and then for the next 2 years of their life, they're just miserable and they're tight on cash. And that goes into, when I'm interacting with people, I just want to, make people feel welcome and included. You always look at these things like the Strength Finder and these different personality assessments. They're always about inclusion and bringing people along with you. I always want people to feel like a good part of the group. That's one of the reasons I know we've connected through networking events now. And that's one of the reasons why I love networking events too, is you're making people feel included. So basically everything I do is about inclusion, working with people, making them feel like they're part of the group, and then also just doing right by them and helping them out how you can. So,
well, it's apparent that you have really good values, and I'm sure that yields endlessly for you. So many people out there are so transactional, and they don't realize that that's counterproductive. When you do have good values, it's contagious, and it comes back, I think, tenfold.
It comes back, and it comes back in different ways that you wouldn't expect. When I left my previous company, I left on good terms. We're still really close with each other, but I left, quite a few franchisees who I put into business or I did work with over the years. And I still hear from some of them occasionally, which is really cool. They'll call me. And there was one time I actually had a guy call me, and he told, just to say, it was on a Saturday morning. He said, "Hey, I just wanted to give you a heads up. I sold my business." I thought, well, that's great. I was like, "Just retirement?" He goes, "Yeah." We had a good few years. We did 10 years in the business. We sold it off. We're going to go enjoy our time on the boat and retire for a little bit and probably do something else afterwards. But I always liked working with you, and I wanted to call and tell you. He didn't have to call and tell me that, but it was really cool just to hear that he did that for him and his family. And that's something that I really enjoyed about the process, is because I didn't ask for that, never expected it. But these people just come back in your life because you treat them right while you're working with them in the moment.
Yeah, I think that I can really appreciate and relate to a lot of your motivations. And I think that more people are motivated by those things. There's more depth and reward to the world than money.
It is. And money's great. Money is what we all want to make at the end of the day. We all like money, but for me, I never plan on being the highest earner. I never plan on making the most money, but I want to make sure that the people who I interact with are having a great time and they enjoy it. And they know if they call me and say they want to go grab a drink, we'll go grab a drink. If they want to go grab coffee, whatever, or just sit down and talk. That's what it's about, is putting those emotional, putting the deposits like in the emotional bank account.
Mm-hmm.
And then makes you feel good, makes them feel good, and it's a win-win for everybody.
And that's the stuff you remember at the end of your career. It's not the transactions, it's those relationships that you've built. I think that's a powerful message that anyone could adopt.
I read something one time, and again, this is all back to reading and books and just leadership. I forgot who said it, but they said, one of these days you're going to die. And they're like as morbid as it sounds, imagine your funeral and you're sitting there in your casket. Now, there can be a number of scenarios. Is in your casket, are you at a one-room funeral home? Is there a pretty decent crowd? Or do you have the entire gymnasium of a college, or like this entire stadium of college rented out, because that many people in the stadiums loved who you are, and they're happy that you were there, and they're there to remember you just as much as you made an impact on their life, or are they there in the long run after you're gone? And that's sort of something that's always stuck with me. When that time comes, and there are going to be 5 people in the room, or there are going to be 1,000 people in the room, just being able to sit there for hours talking about nice things that I did and ways that I've helped them out through the years. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
Because once you're gone, you're gone. But what you've done and the memories that you leave with people, that's going to go on to the next generation.
That's the legacy that you talk about.
Back to that Ed Milet book, he even talks about now, he goes, there's going to be one person in your family that's the change. There's going to be the one person that changes the path of a family. Are you going to be that person, or are you just going to kind of go with the status quo? And either one's fine, but if you want to be that one, you've got every opportunity in the world to be that one person that does something different and to make a change.
That's a great message. Is there any last advice that you would give to someone watching this podcast that maybe you wish you had? Or
yeah, think on this one. One last piece of advice I'd say, ultimately, like I said, just do good. Do good by people. Always be willing to help out. Always be willing to see where your services can work into somebody's situation, because you really don't know where it's going to lead to. It might lead to a conversation on a podcast, might lead to a business meeting, a new lifelong friend, spouse, who knows? But, just helping, it's going to, in the long run, if more people helped each other, you're going to get a lot farther, and the world's going to work together. So,
great advice. Where can people find you if they want to reach out or they might be interested in your services?
Yeah, really, the biggest one is if you go on my personal Instagram, it's Eric Redden, at Eric Redden. It's pretty simple. That's just a few pictures of me. It never post on there, so just message me and I'll respond. But if you want more professional things, it's LinkedIn, and there's Eric M. Redden on LinkedIn, and it's under Hypergrowth Franchising is what you'll find me at. Title line is Franchise Operations and Development Executive. So always on LinkedIn, very rarely on Instagram.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was super insightful.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, that concludes this episode of Shakin' Hands. I'm your host, Jack Moran. You can find me on Instagram at Blue Collar Kid. That is Blue Collar KEHD. If you have any suggestions for guests or questions you want asked, do not hesitate to reach out. But other than that, continue tuning in for some more interesting guests and conversations. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.